season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
Now, here we go, here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 47 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. My name is Kyle Sutherland, and we've got a special treat for you, as this is, it is the first episode of somewhat the 2025 softball season. We're going to visit with two members of Extra Innings Softball, which I'm sure everybody, at least the softball fans who are listening or watching, are very familiar with Extra Inning. They do rankings for players, and they've actually got a podcast now. And of course, they do some written content. But the ones that we are going to be talking with are actually former Division I softball players, Katie Lively, as well as Jessie Warren. Katie played for Troy University during her collegiate career and graduated about a year or two ago. And then Jessie Warren, probably many of you definitely remember if you followed the College World Series in its entirety, as she was on that Florida State team that won it all in 2018, and she was actually awarded the most outstanding player. So she was on the last team to win a Women's College World Series, not named the Oklahoma Sooners. So really excited to talk to them. Been trying to set this up for about a month now. Our schedules finally coordinate, and just wanted to kind of just get them on because that's the source that just about everybody uses, and rightfully so, for player rankings and the things that I just mentioned a second ago for somewhat national content, I guess, kind of the things that I do in Arkansas and others do as well. That's kind of what they do on a national level. So we're going to talk to them about that, as well as their college careers, their recruiting processes. And then, of course, I'm going to end it with some advice for the younger crowd that might be going through the recruiting process, some hard times, whether it be maybe a slump in their game during the season and just things aren't going so well. But we had a really good talk for about 35 minutes, and really excited for them to hear what they have to say. So without further ado, here's our interview with Extra Innings Softball's Katie Lively and Jessie Warren. All right, we're happy to be joined by Extra Innings Softball's Katie Lively as well as Jessie Warren. You that follows college softball probably recognize their names from their careers. That was not either one of them was too long ago. But first off, I want to welcome you all on. I know that we've kind of been trying to work this out for the past month or so, and what better time to get it rolling now as the season's right around the corner. I guess some of the smaller divisions, like Division II, and those will be starting at the end of the month, and then we start with the big dogs here on February 6th, February 7th. So it's getting really close.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me and Jessie on. We're really excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. We'll start off just kind of, I'll let y'all introduce yourselves. I know that Katie, you're the communications and research director for Extra Inning, and then Jessie, you handle you're the athlete development specialist. So Katie, I guess we'll start with you, just kind of talk about your role a little bit, and then how you got to work with Extra Inning.
Yes. Well, I am Katie. As you mentioned before, I graduated from Troy University, which is a small Division I mid-major outside of Montgomery, Alabama. And I graduated there in 2023, played 5 years there, got my COVID year, all that stuff. So I got an extra year to play, which is really special. I am the communications and research director, like you mentioned. I'm really running most of the social media at Extra Innings Softball and interacting and engaging with the players. I know that we really wanted to revamp a lot of our branding when I got hired back in March. And one of that was really a big thing was just interacting with the players, right? And hearing what they have to say, what they want, what they need, and serving the softball community as best as we can. So that's kind of what I do. I live in Mobile, Alabama now. I'm an Alabama girl through and through. Love the South, love being here. My sister plays at South Alabama, so I'm excited to watch her career grow. This year she's a freshman, so I just love softball. Bonnie, we met I think in July of 2023. I actually interviewed for another job at Extra Inning right after college, fresh out, and it just wasn't the right fit. And then she called me in March of 2024 and talked about this new position that was opening, and she gave me opportunities to work here. And so I feel very, very lucky and blessed to be able to still be in softball, even though I'm not playing anymore. So that's a little bit about me.
And then I am Jessie Warren. I was born and raised in Tampa, Florida, went to Florida State University, Played softball there for 4 years, won a national championship in 2018, got drafted in 18 to play for the USSSA Pride, played with them until 2022. And I also played and started with AU in 2020, and I'm still currently playing with them. And then last year was my first year with USA Softball, playing on the women's national team. And that's kind of a little bit of my athletic career. And then with extra inning softball, Bonnie reached out to me in 2023 to come on board as a correspondent to write articles for extra inning. And I did that for a few weeks. And then in March of 2024, she reached out again. And like Katie was saying, she really voiced wanting to revamp the company into something different. And I was all in for what she had mentioned. So I took on the role as an athlete development specialist. And I kind of helped Katie a little bit with, we have a podcast together. So we co-host a podcast together. I do the editing of the podcast, the scheduling of the podcast. And then I also create templates for our website for young athletes to print and kind of fill out and do for themselves, to kind of just have, some type of guide in the things that we kind of believe in with extra inning softball. And a lot of the things that we're doing now are just so cool. And I wish as an athlete that when I was that like a young age, I would have had a lot of the stuff that we have. So I love it. I love being a part of a team of all women. And it's just really cool to work for EIS.
Yeah, for sure. And the things that y'all were talking about kind of in your job descriptions, a little bit of that is very familiar to what I do kind of in the high school ranks. Now, as far as Jessie, I know you mentioned you design templates. That's not my thing. I think that's probably the thing out of graphic design, podcasting, writing, that's probably the things that I am not the best at. But you've both mentioned about rebranding and how the company's kind of, I guess maybe for lack of a better term, taking some different directions as far as the way that the company is now. I'll give the floor to either one of you just to say what y'all want to say, but what are kind of some differences that maybe you're doing now as opposed to the previous way?
Jessie, you want it or I can take it?
You can take it.
Okay. Well, so I know that extra inning has always been notorious for their rankings. And I know that once we revamped into what we are now, we kind of just did some things differently with the rankings, kind of revamped those, because as much as I know that we do get, some criticism for it, they also are just such an amazing way to, recognize athletes and use it as a recruiting tool and being able to just celebrate, their hard work. And so we didn't want to take that away fully, but we just wanted to fix it. We wanted to make sure there was no ties. I know that was a big issue, was, having a bunch of people tied at one position or at one spot, might I add, instead of, having an actual straight top 100, top 200, whatever it is. So we took away the ties. We actually are ranking by position now instead of, I think it was all encompassing. Before me and Jessie and the revamp happened, extra inning at the time was doing just a straight extra elite 100 with every position. So now we position them out because, it's kind of hard to compare a pitcher to an outfielder to an infielder to a catcher and see which one's best. I think it's better, being able to compare them within their own position. So, and then we have a rankings committee, which is a new thing that has been developed, and it's comprised of a bunch of women that played the game, coached in the game, just professionals in the sport. It's a bunch of women that just want to make the rankings better. And so it's an anonymous group, and we are so happy to have them. They help us tremendously with just being able to be accurate with the rankings. So those are the big things with the ranking side of it. And then really just, vamping our content and putting it into a new direction, having interviews. So we do a Voices from the Field interview where we usually have players and coaches on in travel softball. And it's so much fun to hear about their story. We ask them about recruiting a lot, because recruiting is something we really wanted to touch more on. I know we might talk about that later a little bit, but recruiting is such a big thing in the sport now. So we do a lot of recruiting things with interviews. We did a tip of the week for a few months in the fall. We got a college coach on, and he or she gave us a tip that they would like people to know about recruiting. So we have a recruiting tab now on our website. We have a podcast, like Jessie mentioned. It's Voices from the Field podcast. It's on Spotify, and me and Jessie are just able to talk everything softball and have some guests on the podcast as well and give some insight on that. So just a few of those things are something that we're super excited about. And it's really just being able to connect with those athletes. And like Jessie said, give them something that we wish we had. We have an ambassador program now that I had, and it's just a way that the players can really join together. I've gotten so many pictures of the girls that are in the program taking pictures together at tournaments, meeting each other for the first time. And so it's really fun to connect them in that way, help them learn about branding, help them learn about just kind of using their platform to just make the game better. So those are a few things that I know we've done. Jessie, if you have anything to add, feel free.
Yeah, I know we've added some new tabs to our website as well that include, different forms that players can fill out to present stories about their journey. And we share that with, our community of our softball community. And a lot of these stories are very inspiring as a player myself to hear and just be a part of. So I think that's another cool feature that we have, is allowing these athletes to speak about their journey and tell other athletes what they're experiencing, because not everyone's journey is the same when it comes to softball recruiting and all of that. So I think that's really cool as well.
Yeah.
Or did you have something to say, Katie?
Yeah, I was going to add, we also added a ranking software that's been huge as well. So we've been able to kind of have a program that streamlines the statistics, the tournaments played, all that stuff. So I forgot to add that in there, but I wanted to make sure that was a huge addition that we had this year as well.
No, I totally, just listening to y'all. I mean, it's like, I don't want to say it maybe gave me nightmares, but listening to what y'all were saying about like how, rankings can be polarizing. I don't really do player rankings. Now I have done lists, like the tops of their position with no rank, but I do team rank. I do basketball team rankings. I do our Arkansas softball rankings courses I've mentioned to y'all, football. So I get it. They're very polar. And as we know, a lot of times they're they are subjective. I mean, it's a lot of opinions, but no, it definitely, I can see where you're coming from as far as the rewarding factor of it. If you're number one in the nation, that's pretty awesome. I mean, if you're ranked in general amongst the entire country, that's pretty amazing. But just kind of talking about that. Now, I know that a lot of that is pretty much all of it is based on a lot of the travel scene, kind of some of the things that you see in softball. So maybe what are some things, and I don't want to get too far into it, but just as far as like maybe on the surface, what are some things that y'all kind of look for other than maybe just the talent? Because obviously when you see a number one player in the nation, I think that a lot of people, particularly in football and basketball, from what I've recognized, it's almost like these players are robotic. Oh, well, they're the number one player in the nation. They have to be perfect all the time. We forget that these kids are human beings. So what are some of the factors that really go into where y'all put kids in the rankings?
Yeah, that's a loaded question for sure. I know that when the rankings committee was formed and Bonnie really headed that, really wanted to get a bunch of people in on it and get these coaches, these players, being able to recognize these athletes in the best way we can. So when the rankings committee got together, the big things that they had said was obviously stats. You have to look at stats. As much as it sucks, you have to look at stats. Tournaments played is a huge thing. There's so many tournaments during travel ball that happen in the summer. And so being able to kind of list those tournaments and just kind of determine which ones are national, I think that's a huge thing is, if you're not playing any national tournaments, it's kind of hard to, rank a player nationally, when they're not playing the national tournaments. I'm not saying they don't have to play every single one, but kind of looking at the national tournaments they played, the regional tournaments they played, just the caliber of competition. When we were talking to the rankings committee, we kind of were talking about like the RPI system in college softball, right? Like they go off of that strength of schedule. So the best way that the rankings committee kind of felt like we could do that was through tournaments played, look at their strength of schedule. They playing the big tournaments, they playing the good tournaments. We want to give opportunity for those players that may not play in the national tournaments to still get recognized, obviously. But, if there's a player playing in 4 national tournaments, which is probably the most you could play, and they have great stats, they probably will more likely be ranked higher than a player that may not have played in, a ton of national tournaments. That was a huge thing. And then really just going off of, like you said, you have those robotic players that are ranked number one always. So always looking at those kind of accolades as well is important. Because, if they're ranked number one with 3 other companies, hey, they're probably pretty good. So we need to look at that as well. So those are a few things the rankings committee really came up with deciding. And then we also talked to coaches in travel ball and kind of asked them, like, what would you how would you determine this? Because that's the big thing is when coaches come to us having complaints and concerns, while we hear them, we're like, so what do you suggest, right? Like, what would you do differently? Because it's kind of having them help us kind of troubleshoot some things and figure out what the best way to do it is, because they're, at the end of the day, they're with the players the most and they know their players the most. So getting their input is super important, and trying to look at, the player as a whole and not just its stats.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask that question too, personally, for me, to make sure that I'm maybe doing things the right way, because to hear that, a publication as respected as y'all's, because I look at strength of schedule probably more than, I know that probably the people that listen or follow my work in Arkansas probably get tired of me talking about strength of schedule, because I just mention it all the time. Because the thing is, especially in high school, you can't watch every game because there's either not a stream, you can't be everywhere. So that's what I try to do too, is I try to talk to coaches around the state as much as I can. So I think that's probably the best way to do it, straight to schedule. And then of course, talk to the ones that, as you said, Katie, that are around them all the time. So I want to get into a little bit of y'all's careers here. So I remember I'm actually a Sun Belt junkie. So of course I watch Florida State. I'm a Sun Belt junkie. So I like, so the Sun Belt, Southland, of course we have, Central Arkansas is not in the Southland anymore. They're in the A-Sun, but when they were in the Southland, so of course I follow the A-Sun as well. But yeah, I love following South Alabama, of course, Louisiana with Glasgow. There's not there anymore, I know. But so I remember both of your careers. And Jessie, I'll start with you. First of all, I love the fact, and I mentioned this to you, Katie, I love the fact that both of you are defensive, just stalwarts. I think, Katie, you had a perfect fielding percentage in 5 years, which is just phenomenal. Obviously, Jessie, you were the most outstanding player of the. I actually saw that stat maybe about an hour before we were recording when I was finishing up some research. And then, of course, Jessie, you were the 2018 most outstanding player of the College World Series, won 2000. I think it was 15 Defensive Player of the Year in the ACC, right? Sometime around there.
Remember.
Sometime around there. So, both of you had very great careers, and kind of a little bit about I've always loved softball, and of course I grew up playing baseball and everything, loved the game. But for a while, really until about maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, you couldn't find it really anywhere unless you were on the West Coast. Of course, as a little kid, I had a crush on Jenny Finch. So that's what really got me starting to like it. But I was always just really enthused by the windmill motion. I always wondered how in the world you didn't skin your knees up when you were wearing shorts. It's just something that I've always been really interested in. And then Arkansas went on their first super regional run back in 2018, and I've pretty much been hooked ever since. So, Jessie, when y'all won that national championship, that was really my first one of watching the NCAA tournament all the way through. But a tidbit that probably people forget, y'all were the last team not named Oklahoma to win a national championship. So just talk about that run. Obviously, that's a phenomenal program at Florida State, always a contender. Just kind of talk about that national championship run that y'all had in 2018.
Yeah, that whole season was just amazing. The growth that we had from game one to the end of the season, obviously winning, was just something that I'll never forget. That whole week in Oklahoma City was phenomenal. I don't even know how to explain it. It's so hard to go back and create the emotion, but it almost feels like I could go back and create the emotion. So, Coach does such a good job with that program. And again, the growth, the team, the camaraderie, the chemistry that we had, it was the best team that I've ever played on. And going into the tournament, obviously, we were the underdogs. And we'd always gone to the World Series and had always lost our first game. Anytime FSU goes to OKC, I don't know what it is, but we always lost the first game. They lost to 2 games in 14. We went in 16. We lost our first game. We ended up getting to the semifinals my sophomore years, and we lost to Auburn on a play that I think I got the girl out, but we'll not get into that. And then, if I'm not mistaken, we lost to UCLA the first game in 18. So again, no one believed that we were going to come back and win every single game. But our whole postseason that year, we'd been down in a very important game that we needed to win in order to move on. And every single time we figured it out. With our backs against the wall, we always figured it out. And they obviously named us the Cardiac Kids because they joked and said that we would always give them a heart attack when, the game's on the line. But yeah, I think just that whole year, it was so cool to be a part of, and the amount of things that I've learned as a human being, not even an athlete, and how to talk to teammates and how to go about things that I needed to get done when my back was against the wall, and the resilience that we showed. It was just like a really cool opportunity and really cool thing to be a part of.
No doubt. And Katie, I know if was it your freshman or sophomore year that was your COVID season?
It was sophomore.
Let's say I knew you were there when all that stuff happened and the season got. So you endured that, but ended up going on to have a really great career. As I said, 1,000, and we'll talk about defense here once I ask you this question. But 1,000 career, that's a perfect percentage. I mean, that's insane. 100%. I mean, that is, I'm going 1,000 off but that is insane. I mean, to play 5 years, I've seen some really good ones. I don't know that I've seen that in a 5-year career, but just talk about, what I know you said your sister is now playing there at South Alabama too. So, legacy and you're getting to watch that now kind of in a way, I guess, live through her a little bit of post your career. So just talk about your time there. And, as you said, you're from Alabama, so a very familiar area and just the time that you had there.
Yeah, Troy, Alabama has my heart forever and ever. If anyone's been to Troy, people probably are like, really? Like, it's such a small town. But my coach, I had Beth Mullins as my head coach for 4 out of the 5 years. We had a coaching change my last year. But Beth Mullins she's one of the best coaches I've ever had. She was actually our outfield coach. So she taught me so much about the game of outfield. I think outfield's kind of under-taught. A lot, everyone's just thrown out there and be like, oh, catch the ball, whatever. But there's a lot of technique to it. There's a lot of little things that I don't think people coach enough. And so I definitely could say that she is a huge reason why I even had a career at all. She's awesome. I love my time there. We actually went to a regional my junior year, 2021. That was the first time I think we had made a regional appearance since like 1996 or something like that. So that was really special to be able to kind of see that program build. When I got recruited there, I think they were really having to rebuild the program. I know that I think it was maybe the people that are 2 years older than me, they were juniors when I was a freshman. I think their class, they hosted conference tournament their freshman year and they didn't even make tournaments. So they had to work the tournament and not even be in it. And so to be able to kind of be a part of a program that really started not great, started kind of from the ground and built up all the way to making that regional appearance in 2021. It's just so special. And I love my time there. I love that university. South is kind of a rival. I know people always kind of give me a little bit of trouble with that, of being like, how did you let your sister go to South? But I can definitely say that the coaching staff at South is just as phenomenal. And I'm so excited and lucky to be able to watch my sister play her 4 years here. So I feel very lucky in that.
Yeah, that's right. You went. I'm sorry. I mixed it up. You went to. Sorry,
oh,
it's
no,
been
you're
a long
fine.
day.
No, you're fine.
Well, for those that don't know, I guess that Jessie and Katie, I had a mishap. It was a mishap in terms of basically just an injury with my neighbor right before we started recording. So I'm still gathering all my thoughts together.
Fine.
So same conference, just different team. So yes, I apologize about that.
Rivals at that.
Exactly, rivals. So yeah, there might be some people that are a little bit upset with me at that, but. But now let's talk a little bit about defense. So, look, and it's just like in football, the quarterback's going to get all the blame, whether it's good or bad. And in basketball, the point guard is the same way. And in softball, pitcher, it's just kind of the nature of how things are. But we got a lot of really good pitchers in Arkansas right now. You got Brinkley Morton that's going to Mississippi State. You've got Mackenzie Freeman that's going to Tulsa. Emory Bolin going to Central Arkansas. I could keep going on. And y'all recently did one over a 26 pitcher, Kaylee McDonald from Little Old Desart. Phenomenal player going to Southern Miss. But a lot of times when I promote, I can't tell you how many times I've promoted a pitcher and I've had a parent text me or email me, hey, I really appreciate that, but you need to talk a little bit more about their catcher, or you need to talk a little bit more about the defense behind, which I can certainly appreciate. Yeah. But you guys being, the heralded defensive players that you were, you earned every bit of it. Talk a little bit about how much pride you both take in defense, just because it is, again, pitching is extremely important, but what pitchers have behind them or their battery mates behind the plate, that is equally as important to winning ball games. So just kind of talk about the pride that you both take on the defensive side.
I'll start.
Yeah.
I think defense is just like a super important part of the game. I mean, obviously you have the pitchers who are pitching the ball and they have the ball every single play, as well as the catcher. And I think just, getting the opportunity when your opportunity comes, when the ball's hit at you to, show up for your pitcher and your catcher and your battery, I think is just super important. For me, like, defense isn't just about making like routine plays. It's more about like being there for the team when like the game's on the line. Whether it's, diving play like I made in 2018, which was crucial for that moment in that game. Whether it's like trying to get the ball out of my glove as quick as possible to get it to first, to get a slapper or a fast runner out, or just like making a really good play in general. Just, I don't know, something about it just fires me up. And defense is my favorite part of the game. I used to be an offensive gal, and I don't know what switched, but I think after that play in 2018, I was like, wow, like I'd never had the opportunity to showcase like how good I was on the defensive side. It was always the offensive side of my game that was talked about in college. But I just wanted people to know that, and granted, I know people know that I'm a good athlete, but I wanted people to know that I wasn't just someone who was going to show up the plate. I was going to show up throughout the game on either side of the ball. And I think as a third baseman and as someone who plays at a corner who has to have fast reflexes, I think a lot goes into understanding pitchers and where they're feeding, batters balls. And whether you're throwing a slapper or something on the outside corner, a power hit or something on the inside corner, like I think it's super important to know what pitch is coming every single pitch so that you can be your best self on the defensive side for your pitcher. Especially if they're working their butts off to, get outs on the mound. But I think just all in all, just defense is where trust is really built amongst players. Whether you're trusting in yourself, you're trusting in your teammates, or just the preparation that you've put in to the game to get to those moments. It's just little moments like that kind of like fire me up that I absolutely love. And at the end of the day, like defense is really my happy place, and it's where I feel the most connected to the game in a sense. And I just like to take every opportunity I have to be the best that I can on the defensive side, which is why I hold myself to such high standards when it comes to my defensive game.
Yeah. I know for me, our culture at Troy was very defensive minded, which is funny because if you look at our stats, hitting was kind of our game. But I think in my time there a few years, we had like set the record for our team fielding percentage. And I credit that to Taylor Smart a ton. She was our assistant coach. And I know our motto was defense wins championships. I think it's hitting wins games, but defense wins championships. So I think that was just a mindset that was just like our culture at Troy, and it's something that we just had to develop and go with. And so I think it's true. You have hitting, and I love offense. Like Jessie, like I'm an offensive girl through and through. I love hitting. I love watching it. I love practicing it, or I did love practicing it. But it's really defense that sets you apart, in my opinion. I think that if you make the plays, the routine plays and the big plays, you'll win a lot of championships. At the end of the day, it's catching and throwing. And I think that if you can master that side of the game, I think hitting it'll take care of itself. But I think if you can't make the routine plays, it's not going to matter how much you hit. Because if you score 10 runs, but they score 11, it's not going to matter. So right. I think the defense wins championships is a big thing that we kind of carried at Troy, and it's something that I definitely take a lot of pride in.
You both touched on your hitting. What was the hardest pitch for y'all to hit when it's thrown, perfectly?
Rise ball.
Rise.
So
I say the easiest. I say the easiest is a changeup for me, and then the hardest rise ball. I don't know what it is about changeups, but I just love sitting and hitting changeups.
I think you're the first person to ever tell me that because changeups are so tricky. I mean, well, there's a girl named Libby May that we had here. She's going to Nichols, I believe, from Little Atkins, Arkansas, outside, kind of just outside of or about an hour outside of Little Rock. Her changeup, I'm not joking, was like 30 miles an hour. I mean, it like floated and like you could pretty much go run and do something by the time it hit the mitt, but nobody could hit it. I mean, every once in a while, but that was, it was pretty crazy. But I think that might be the first time I've heard rise and drop plenty of times, but but then again, I mean, yeah, I was glad to have some different opinions though, because I've had plenty where without skipping a beat, like 2 or 3 at a time, we'll say like a rise or a drop or something. So good to have different opinions always.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why Jessie's pro. She can hit some change ups.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Well, we'll get it as we start to wrap things up here. We'll get into the recruiting side of it, and that is just an even from when y'all were going through it. I mean, it's just an ever-changing thing. Of course, you've got the transfer portal. Of course, you got the NIL. And I'll say, football greed, and I'll leave it at that. But then you think about just the teams that are having to travel from the West Coast to the East Coast. That's something that's probably not being talked about as much, just because, I mean, you look at the West Coast, and that was softball for the long, and it still, other than Oklahoma, pretty much is. But now you're having to, if a kid goes to UCLA, she's going to have to travel to the East Coast, or just all these different like things that geographically do not make sense. So you add that into the mix. Just kind of talk about some things, really some of the key differences that both of you have witnessed since the time that you went through.
Yeah, almost all of it, at least to me. I mean, I think most of it has changed so much with the September 1 rule. You can't talk to coaches until your junior year. I don't know, Jessie, how old were you when you committed to Florida State?
Going into my sophomore year of high school.
Okay, yeah.
Back then, you could be like in 7th grade. And
I remember an 8th grader. I remember an 8th grader committed to Florida when she was in 8th grade before all the rule changes. But
yeah, so that's a huge thing. And then I think social media has just changed the game overall. To make it quite simple, I could probably ramble on and on about how different it is. But I think social media and the way that people connect with coaches now, I know I made a recruiting video that I emailed to all the coaches, and now it's just, you just tag them in your post and highlights and stats and all that kind of stuff. So I would just say the social media aspect, and then when you can talk to coaches, are the 2 biggest changes that I've seen since I went through the recruiting process.
Yeah, I think obviously the rise in technology since early 2000s, late 2000s, and then even like now, it's just like back then it was like a lot of word of mouth. Like, yeah, granted, there was still YouTube and all of that, but now you have on the football side of things, mostly like Huddle and all of that stuff that you can showcase all of your videos in one, server. And now we have Twitter X Twitter X, Instagram, TikTok, which is probably getting shut down. Hopefully not, but yeah. So athletes being able to upload game footage instantly, connect with college coaches, and then I know there's a lot of like websites now where people host servers that you're able to just automatically find a school and send them a email from that website. I think it's called like sportsrecruiters.com or something. And then there's a bunch of other ones. And then just speaking on what you mentioned with the whole conference realignments, I think that is just so bizarre with having to travel as much as they're going to have to travel, especially when, you have long games and then having to travel across the country for
having to play 3-game series and travel across the country for that. Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy to me. But yeah, I think definitely a lot has changed since then. Obviously, like Katie mentioned, the whole conversations can't happen until September 1 of your junior year. So yeah, definitely a lot of changes.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't even think we've seen the craziest of it yet. Yeah. We got more stuff coming. So, well, one of the things that I always like to do, especially, since I take such a good pride in covering this game, every time I especially talk to ones that have played at the next level, I try to ask you, advice, what you would give to the younger crowd. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Jolie Mitchell from Tech, of course, Arkansas kids. Jolie Mitchell from Texas, Mara Moore from Tulsa. There's a host of others. Mackenzie Childers from North Texas that I talked with over the summer. And I felt like when I was going to ask that question, I was going to get a lot of the same answer. And to an extent you do, but I got a lot of different ones. And so that's why I continued to do that. So I want to end this here. Both of you have played, as we talked about, at extremely high levels of softball. So what is 1, 2, maybe 3, just what is some key advice that you would give to somebody going through the recruiting process that might not be getting those offers that they feel that they should, and maybe just need a little bit of a pick me up?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. I think just to name a few. One, just like fall in love with the process. Everyone's journey is completely different. And Katie's recruiting process was completely different than my recruiting process and so forth. I think too, it's easy to focus on like big moments, like going to that school that you want to go to and winning a national championship or getting recruited by that school. But it really just like falls in line with how hard you're working and the daily grind that you're getting presented by. So embracing the hard work, embracing the suck, because it sucks working so hard and not seeing the results, but it's going to come. Whether it's like the extra reps at night, or just waking up super early in the morning to go lift in the gym, whatever that looks like for that individual. I think those moments are what's going to shape their character and prepare them for the bigger stage. The second thing is controlling what you can control. I think obviously there's so much out of your control when you're getting recruited, because you don't have all of the answers, and you're probably sitting there wondering like what these coaches think about you, and maybe you'll never know. But I think just like in sports in general, there's so much that's outside of our control that we can't focus on and we don't need to focus on. But there's a few things that you can focus on, which is your attitude, your effort, and how well you can respond to certain things. So just trying to stay consistent with those things. And then the last thing is just like failure recovery, like being okay with failing. You're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect. We're human. And I don't think college coaches, I was actually talking to Katie about this in our podcast, college coaches aren't looking for perfectionism. They're looking for someone who's going to be able to grow in certain areas, and show resilience when they do make an error or fail. If you don't fail, you're not going to, grow as an athlete. And I can't tell you how many times I failed at certain things in life and on the field. And it's just made me who I am today. And it's made me such a great athlete. So if I could leave them with those three things, that's kind of what I would tell them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I like that, Jessie, a lot. And I think I would definitely say that consistency piece and just keep chipping away. Cause that's something that I think everybody can relate to in some way of just, keep the grind going, even when it may not be working out. Maybe it's not something that, it's not working out the way you thought. But I think when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to like looking at schools, where do I want to go? Who do I want to contact? Who do I want to go to camps? I think it's just really important for these athletes. I think they have that advantage of not really being able to talk to coaches until their junior year. Obviously, you go to camps, you do your research, you kind of find that list, your sophomore year. But I think it's really cool, and it's an opportunity to be able to kind of do it a little bit later, to where you know yourself a little bit more and you know what you want. So I think it's just really important to look into schools that fit what you want and know what you want, and find the schools that have that. I think a lot of times, especially with social media, we get caught up in the big name, we get caught up in the flashy things. And while it's, great and wonderful to be able to commit to a big school, and if that's your goal, like absolutely go get it. But I think it's really important just to kind of know where you're at and know what you want. Because the reality of it is there's coaching changes all the time. There's a transfer portal now. And so you don't really want to get caught in that because, you didn't really do your research beforehand. So I think it's really important to do your research beforehand, know what you want, and find schools that align kind of with what you value and what you're looking for in your 4 years in your career.
I love that you finished with that, because that's what I tell people. I'm not a scout or anything, but I do have parents reach out to me and say, hey, look, we're looking at doing this. We're looking at doing that. And I'm like, look, and they might mention a Division I school as opposed to like a JUCO. And I'm like, look, here's the deal is I know that there's a lot of people out there that are D1 or bust. I know that's a very common term that we use today, but especially with that new JUCO thing, which I don't know if that's going to last, but you pretty much, that's what I tell them. Go where you're wanted and where you feel like you're going to be happy. And am I on track with that?
Absolutely.
That's what and y'all would know a lot more than me, but that's just from my experiences. So,
yeah.
Well, Katie, Jessie, it's been an honor. Like I said, I loved watching y'all during your careers, and it's great to just kind of get some insight. That's one thing I try to do is get our kids not only mentioned on the statewide level, but the national level. And I know, as we mentioned earlier, y'all might get a little bit of criticism for this and that, but you are very appreciated for what you both do. Extra Innings is a great program, and I really appreciate what y'all do for the girls.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and thank you for sharing that passion for softball. We love seeing people that are wanting to grow the game and love it as much as we do. So we really do appreciate you investing so much into those girls in Arkansas.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that will do it for episode number 47. You can watch, of course, as we get into the softball season, we'll have the weekly coverage. Of course, right now we've got the basketball going. And then once we get into February, we're going to start talking about the dirt, both baseball and softball. So again, thanks to Jessie Warren and Katie Lively of Extra Innings Softball. For all of us here at Natural State Sports, my name's Kyle Sutherland. We will catch you next time.